Breaking tonight, just 24 hours after the Ferguson decision came down, we are getting a much better picture of the evidence the grand jury considered as it decided whether or not to indict Officer Darren Wilson. Trace Gallagher reports from our West Coast newsroom. Trace?
Megan, Darren Wilson told the grand jury he pulled his weapon after Michael Brown punched him in the face. Wilson says he told Brown to back off. Instead, Brown grabbed his gun and they struggled. Wilson testified, quote, "When I grabbed him, the only way I can describe it is I felt like a 5-year-old holding on to Hulk Hogan." Still inside the police SUV, Wilson pulled the trigger 5 times. It fired twice, striking Brown once in the hand. There was blood in the vehicle, on the gun, and on Wilson's uniform. The officer says when he got out of his patrol vehicle, he was trying to contain Michael Brown. Instead, Brown turned on him. Wilson says, quoting again, "I keep telling him to get on the ground. He doesn't. I shoot a series of shots." At this point, it looked like he was almost bulking up to run through the shots, like it was making him mad that I'm shooting at him. A female witness described it this way, quote, "The cop was wobbling. The big kid turned around, had his arms out with attitude. The cop just stood there. Dang if that kid didn't start running at the cops like a football player." Overall, Wilson fired 12 shots, hitting Brown at least 6 times. He says it was the first time he'd ever used his gun in the line of duty. Even some witnesses sympathetic to Michael Brown adjusted their stories. Witness number 14 told police, quote, "Brown was to me, and I'm just going to say it, he was executed. Wilson had made up his mind he was going to kill him, but later had this exchange with federal investigators." Question: each time the officer was firing, Michael Brown was coming toward him. Answer: yes. Question: but you were able to hear the officer say stop. Answer: oh yeah, he was very loud. The same witness told investigators that people on scene told him to keep his mouth shut, and others with nothing better to do than get high all day were embellishing their story, saying, quote, "The officer ran up behind him and shot him in the back." The agent responds, "And that's not true?" Answer: not true. Finally, there was a 20-foot trail of blood indicating Michael Brown stopped, turned, and went back toward the officer. Megan.
Trace, thank you. Well, my next guest has been critical of the Missouri governor's response to Ferguson, demanding to know why the National Guard was not sent in to do more to stop the violence last night. Earlier today, Governor Nixon did announce plans to significantly increase the number of Guard troops in the area, tripling from about 700 to 2,200, and you can see the difference tonight. Peter Kinder is the Lieutenant Governor of Missouri. He's a Republican. The governor, Governor Nixon, is a Democrat. Good of you to be here, sir, tonight. And so the governor today sounded outraged that you had accused him of possibly collaborating with President Obama and/or Eric Holder to keep the National Guard off of the streets of Ferguson. Why do you believe that's even a remote possibility?
Well, Megan, it's otherwise inexplicable. I did not level that charge. I asked the question. The governor of Missouri is accountable to the people who elected him, as we all are in these offices. The governor of Missouri owes us all some answers. He owes us some answers beyond the flimsy cliches and empty pieties that he offered this afternoon in his press conference when one reporter put my question to him. My question was, why was the National Guard called out? Was it because, as I suspect may be the case, that officials in Washington, D.C. in the Obama administration and the Holder Justice Department, perhaps Eric Holder himself or someone doing his bidding, leaned on the governor very hard not to call in the National Guard?
Why wouldn't they want the National Guard called in?
We just had your reporter tell us we have 25 businesses burned. You've seen people, their tear-stained faces, their dreams are in ashes, and the governor of Missouri has to answer for this.
Why wouldn't President Obama and Eric Holder want the National Guard called in to keep the peace in Ferguson?
I don't know. I don't know. Megan, here's how inexplicable it is. Last week when the governor ordered the mobilization of the Guard, sent them in, and declared a state of emergency, I issued a statement supporting him unreservedly. Now, a governor who was prepared to do that proactively on the front end, then when the critical moment comes and the mayor of Ferguson, James Knowles, is crying out to get a hold of the governor as he watches his city burn from his back porch of his house, and and he can't get the governor. He can't get the governor's chief of staff. He can't get the director of public safety who works for the governor, or so much as the lady who, or the person who empties the waste baskets in the governor's office to answer.
I gotcha. But look, the St. Louis County Police Chief Belmar
calls
said
to me.
I just want the viewers to know that the St. Louis County Police Chief Belmar said that the initial hands-off tactics by the cops were intended to allow the protesters to stage peaceful demonstrations. He said by the time it got so unstable and they realized it required a more forceful approach, it was basically too late. Now, I want to, before we move on, though, I want the audience to hear what Governor Nixon said today in response to your charge, just so we've got both sides here. Stand by.
That is false and absurd, and politics has nothing to do with what any of the folks up here are doing. We're doing our duty. You have behind me a series of sworn officers. You have hundreds of people out there putting their lives on the line each and every night. Politics has not one bit to do with the tasks at hand, the responsibilities at hand, and the seriousness of this mission.
What do you think now, Lieutenant Governor, now that we're seeing a much calmer Ferguson tonight, and yet we're seeing others call this a race war, saying it's not over, protests erupting in other cities, folks saying they really don't care what the evidence was. What they care about is a black 18-year-old is dead and a white cop has not been charged.
Megan, did you listen carefully to that non-answer by the governor? It was an attempt to deflect the whole thing as political. It is not political when a nonpartisan elected mayor of Ferguson is desperately trying to reach the governor of Missouri, and he can't get his calls returned by anyone in the governor's office. So he starts calling me in the wee hours of the morning. He starts calling the Speaker of the Missouri House, the majority floor leader of the Missouri House, whom he happens to know, and none of us wield the executive power. The executive power as Commander-in-Chief of the Missouri National Guard resides in the Chief Executive's office. That's the governor. Why don't you ask him where he was last night? Was he in a command center? Where was he? Why did they hold the guard back? Let's get some real answers to those questions.
This is the same governor who demanded that there be an indictment the night before the grand jury began its first session, and then had to walk that back.
He demanded a vigorous prosecution.
Right,
Remember?
which was not his role. That was not his role, and he had to walk it back. Lieutenant Governor, thanks for being here.
A lot of answers are needed.
We welcome the governor
Megan.
on this program anytime. We'd love to hear his explanation for all of this when things calm down or earlier. President Obama also calling for calm tonight in Ferguson, while saying it's not his job as president to comment on ongoing investigations and specific cases. The crew is laughing. Really? Up next, a look back at some of the big investigations the president has weighed in on, and reaction from Dr. Ben Carson.
It's not my job as president to comment on ongoing investigations and specific cases. We lost a young man, Michael Brown, in heartbreaking and tragic circumstances.